Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Brawn Body Health and Fitness Podcast. I'm so glad that you're tuning in today. Today I'm joined by Zack Schreier, and Zack is the founder of a company called Quevos. You might have seen that as featured on NBC's Shark Tank. And today Zack and I are going to discuss how he maintains his health and fitness as an entrepreneur, in addition to sharing a little bit of information about his health and fitness companies. He's got some really interesting, unique stuff going on, and I'm excited to kind of put him in the spotlight for today. I know you're going to love this episode, so sit down, relax, and enjoy the show. Zack, welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited to work with you today, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dan.
For people who aren't familiar with you, or maybe they haven't seen that TV show Shark Tank, would you mind kind of filling them in about who you are and all the amazing stuff that you've been doing?
Yeah, of course. So basically, my entrepreneurial journey started in middle school when I was diagnosed with diabetes, type 1 specifically. And that basically put me in control of my health, even though I didn't really want to be in that position as a kid. And for those of you who don't know, type 1s have to basically account for the carbs that they eat. So it's not about avoiding carbs. It's just about counting your carbs and then doing the appropriate amount of insulin to address that number of carbs. And so low carb snacks are really a boon for type 1s. So that led me and my best friend from growing up to create a chip made from egg whites. That's called Quevos. We took that to Shark Tank and got a deal with Daniel Lubetzky. Spoiler alert, I guess I should have said. Yeah, so happy to dive into to more of that story. But currently, I'm actually working on another product. We basically are doing supplements that support metabolic health and specifically fasting. So, we realized a few different things. One of which was that, while supplements are great for all sorts of purposes for daily performance and long-term health, most people don't want to really add a bunch of powders and pills to their life. Like you have to go out there and procure your own stuff and mix your own potions effectively. And so we decided to make supplements much more intuitive by creating delicious products that have, functional benefits.
And that was with Life Stacks, correct?
Exactly. That's Life Stacks. And so that's the venture I'm currently working on. And I'd love to talk to you about anything that you think is interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's such an incredible journey, Zack, especially for someone who's relatively young overall. That's interesting too that you got started in the entrepreneurship at a young age there. And it sounds like you took something that happened to you and you said, look, this is not going to define me. This is going to actually help me create my path forward. You were living a life that a lot of Americans, millions of Americans actually live, having to keep track of blood sugar and blood glucose levels and adjust with insulin levels and adjust with carbohydrate intake on the daily. And it can be difficult, I'm sure, to regulate what you're eating and how it's going to impact your blood sugar, especially when some of the more enjoyable things in life, like chips and ice cream, tend to be the ones that give us the most difficult from a blood sugar level. So I really love and respect how you took something that's a problem and kind of created a solution to it, for lack of a better way to put it.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, as you said, I mean, some of our favorite foods are the ones that do the most damage. So I'd say it's a combination of, basically learning the way in which these foods affect the body, and then having the right sort of interventionist framework for addressing that, and preemptively, hopefully. So basically, it's a balancing act of carb intake and insulin offset. And the issue is those foods you just named rapidly deposit glucose into the bloodstream, but injected insulin takes a long time to work. And so you get this huge sugar spike if you're not careful, and then potentially a plummet. And both of those things are dangerous and avoidable if you time your insulin right and you buffer your carbs the right way. So one thing that's really important is high fiber and high protein. Basically, as you're taking a big bolus of carbs, you want to make sure there's other nutrients in the mix to slow the absorption of those carbs. So that's one thing Quevos really has going for it. It's low carb, high protein, high fiber. So it's my sugar just stays perfectly flat when I have it. So yeah, great for diabetics, type 1 and type 2, really.
Yeah, tell me about Quevos a little bit. How did that get started? I mean, were you just kind of playing around in the kitchen one day with egg whites and you eventually found a way to make all these different honey mustard, cheddar, barbecue, sour cream and onion chips with egg whites as opposed to potatoes? Or how did that really get rolling for you?
Yeah. So I was a picky eater growing up. Even after I was diagnosed, it was that was tough because I was restricted to a pretty small subset of foods. But eggs were definitely top of the list for me. And even though I was picky, it was pretty experimental. So I would do things like, I would take like mozzarella cheese and I would microwave it, or as I cooked eggs, I would like notice that those crispy pieces on the side of like the omelet could be like fried or baked or microwaved and like made into like, crunchier, drier, basically chips. So I discovered that pretty early on, like maybe in middle school or early in high school, and then didn't really think much of it. But then about 5 years later, just as I was heading off to college, the keto wave was kind of actually really coming on pretty strong. And that summer I was coaching some kids in running, but otherwise not doing that much. And I was just like, let's bring back the egg white chips. So I called up my best friend, and we basically started working on that product. It sat somewhat dormant for another year, but then he went to U Chicago, and he took that idea to the undergraduate incubator there. And they're really great. It's a great ecosystem for growing companies. So people were enthusiastic about the concept. The product was coming along, and basically the rest is history. We both took a year off of school. Actually, he's continued to stay off of school indefinitely since then. I went back to school after I sort of did my role, which was develop the product in the manufacturing process. And then shortly post graduating, that's when I turned my attention to life stacks.
That's awesome. That's a really cool journey. And you shared a lot of amazing things that I want to dive into in that little bit there. So first off, as you mentioned, the journey of entrepreneurship, in order for you to succeed, and I would call you successful because at least by, the Shark Tank definition of success, not everyone who goes on that show gets any kind of investment at all, and you did. So what did that take for you to, get to the point you are today, Zach? What did it take for you to succeed? Was there early mornings, late nights, or was it pretty smooth sailing and just kind of work when you wanted to?
Yeah, that's a good question for sure. On this point about success, I guess what I'd say is there's still a lot of work after the show. To make that. It's not like that. The Sharks are buying a guaranteed win.
Right.
They're taking a bet also, and so they've got a portfolio of companies, most of which probably fail still, and some of which succeed and make it all worth it. That's sort of the venture model. And I think the Sharks are a little more conservative than your venture group. They're not expecting 1,000x return. It's maybe more like 5 to 10x that they're looking for. So most of their investments probably do okay, or at least some of them, enough of them to make it worth it. But yeah, there's been a lot of work since then, since the show. But we were lucky, very lucky to do well on the show because a poor performance or an embarrassing slip up or something like that, that'd be tough. That would have stayed with us for a long time. So we knew going in that it was a liability for sure to go out there and basically expose ourselves to 5 million Americans and kind of roll the dice and see how we did. But fortunately, the Sharks were in a great mood, and I think they liked our chicken costumes. And at that point, we had a pretty well developed business and a clear sense of where we had been and where we were going. So I think just the cohesiveness of our story and presentation helped. But yeah, no, I feel very lucky. Like I wouldn't want to roll the dice again and take another chance at a stage like that.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I mean, were you nervous going into that, or?
For sure. Something I often do talk about that I'm not really supposed to talk about is that we actually spent the previous year we actually gone out to the studio to tape, but there was basically a backlog of people on that very first day of filming, and so they said, "Hey, come back next year." Yeah. So we had spent basically all week, all day, kind of preparing ourselves to go on Shark Tank. I had taken God knows how much caffeine that day, and of course, like suffered through all the sort of pre-race jitters for that year, 2019, and then when 2020 came around, we had a much stronger position. We'd done a lot more revenue. The product had improved a lot, and we also prepared more. So I think we were pretty poorly prepared for 2019, but in 2020 we really did what we could to kind of get in the mindset and make sure our answers were very tight. So that was a blessing for sure, and I think it probably took some of the jitteriness out of that second go.
I love the fact that, as you were talking there, Sometimes a door closes on you when you least expect it. Opportunities don't always present themselves when you expect them to. And that seems to have been the case for you with that first time with Shark Tank. But you didn't give up and you didn't just walk away just because, the first opportunity didn't go the way you wanted it to. You kind of continued to persevere, I would say. And I see a lot of overlaps between your own journey and what a lot of people see in their own health and fitness journey, right? They go out and they start doing something, and maybe it doesn't go their way from day one. Maybe it starts a little bit rocky and they kind of have to come back and continue to revisit it a few times before they actually get what they want out of it, I would say.
I was a runner in high school, so that was something that definitely impacted the diabetes. I actually took it up initially for two reasons. My sister had done it and she liked it and met people. The second one is that exercise is great for insulin sensitivity. So, I just knew that that would be a way for me to sometimes have some carbs, in formats like ice cream and pizza and whatever, but also stay metabolically healthy. And you're 100% right that it's a journey. It's not something that you practice a few times and all of a sudden you're, at the top of the game. So that was a lesson that running definitely taught me. And actually, I'm not sure how technical you want to get here, but I think there's some really with most areas, including entrepreneurship and running, there's kind of a core dynamic underneath what's going on that is portable, meaning you can take what you learn basically and apply it elsewhere. With running, basically, I think what we've got here is a homeostatic adaptive system. So homeostatic in the sense that it self-maintains, and the goal is basically to preserve capacity, and adaptive in the sense that once the system is exposed to stress, it basically realizes that in order to maintain homeostasis, it's going to actually have to improve its capacities. So it responds to that stimuli, that stressor, or whatever it is, the running or the lifting, by actually adding capacity in order to maintain homeostasis. Now, if you continue just to basically expose yourself to the same stimulus over and over again, then whatever adaptations you got the first few times you did it are going to basically deplete over time. So you're going to get decreasing marginal benefits from every single session of the same intensity. So what you got to do is take that new fitness level, expose yourself to a stressor that is basically one step past where you're at. So that's sort of the balancing act. Now, I think most people in America have the sense that that means going 100% basically in your sessions. And it's actually much better to go 90% or 80% more of the time than it is to go 100, drain yourself, recover, claw your way back to the capacity to do another session, do it again. It's kind of like, the more adaptive route is to just stress the system in a way that spurs adaptation, not, overload it and then force it to recover for a long time.
Right. Sometimes less is more. And as you were talking there, I was just having like flashbacks to the last time I was reading some of the Tim Ferriss books there. I think Tim Ferriss does an incredible job of mastering what we call the minimum effective dose, which is essentially what you just outlined. Is you want to do enough to improve, but you don't want to do too much to the point where it leaves you burnt out, exhausted, and not wanting to do any more. And I think that's true for any walk of life, whether it's fitness or entrepreneurship. Is ultimately there's this almost like therapeutic window, I'll say, kind of relating it to pharmaceuticals now, is with pharmaceuticals, there's a therapeutic window for everything. If we give too much, we start to get side effects that we don't want. But if we don't give enough, we don't get any effect. So we almost have to find that kind of like Goldilocks sweet spot in the middle. And I would say the same for fitness and entrepreneurship, right? If you're going in for a workout or a run or whatever, and you constantly redline it to the point where you're just so burnt out and exhausted afterwards that you don't want to come back and do another one, then you're going to experience, as you mentioned before, Zach, diminishing returns. Same thing for entrepreneurship, though, I would imagine, and you can speak more to that than I can, but I would imagine if you woke up every day and you just went from sun up to sundown, working your tail off the entire time, you would probably burn out or, in some way burn out rather quickly. Whereas I'm sure you probably went at it with a little bit more of a plan, a little bit more of a strategy, and you probably had some element of balance. Not to say you didn't work hard. I'm sure you had a lot of 12, 14, 16, maybe even 18-hour days, but I'm guessing you probably balanced how often those were.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, I totally agree that just, especially if you're sacrificing sleep, then you're likely to burn out. So that's the thing for me that I try not to let the entrepreneurial activities dictate at all. I don't want them interfering with getting enough sleep so that I can continue, operating at my peak capacity. Oh, sorry, my dog's here. Yeah, I think it's definitely crucial to not overwork yourself in a way that's going to be able to take away from your future capacity to do work. By default, I'm sort of a lazy person, but my way around that is to basically engage with projects that have, that allow me to contribute in a way that feels meaningful and engaging, but that's also productive. So for me, that's product development. That's sort of the creative aspects. That's the strategy. So for me, that's closer to like play than it is work. So that's the sort of thing where, if you could find something that is play and not work, but that does get stuff done, then you can do that 12 hours a day, no problem, and have it add energy instead of take it away. So that's the way I like to work. For me, that means usually like day job is kind of the entrepreneurship side of things, and then especially the to-do list happens during the daytime. And then at night, I'm basically thinking about the businesses rather than like sort of thinking through the day-to-day activities of the businesses. So I think that's sort of like that balancing act where, I just get to let my mind kind of go wherever it wants to with respect to the businesses. That actually ends up adding, it allows us to work smarter during the days because we end up cutting a lot of the sort of crap that might have otherwise, occupied our attention, because it's like you want to sort of switch between these views of like what's really immediate and why you're doing what you're doing at the highest level. And then often, if you're focused enough on why you're doing what you're doing at the highest level, you'll find that you actually want to go a different route than you were going. But if you didn't spend that time to reflect, then you would have just worked dumb for extra days and weeks even. So I think that sort of process allows me to feel like I'm not doing that much work, but still get a lot done.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you do what you love and you love what you do. And I think that's the ultimate key to success, right? Well, happiness, I should say, right? If you don't like what you're doing, maybe you're doing the wrong thing. But that's a separate conversation. So as you just alluded to, you have busy days from, the morning all the way to the evening, and there's a lot of work that has to get done, especially when you have not only one, but two companies that you're working on right now. How are you able to maintain health and fitness, during your day? How are you able to fit in like your workouts, keep your sleep schedule?
Yes, the type one definitely does impact the day to day. You can almost think of it like for somebody that's obsessed with checking their email, it's kind of like an extra email that you're kind of obligated to check a lot, and often respond to. So there is a lot of sort of bandwidth that's dedicated to managing that. Um, for people that have the continuous glucose monitors, as I do, I find there is such a thing as too much checking, and I'm definitely guilty of that right now. Like too much of my attention goes to basically getting those numbers, because I'm curious and I want to know where I'm at. But it's better actually, I think, to check, make a decision, and then put it away for an hour or two at a time instead of checking every 5 minutes. So there's yeah, it definitely plays in, but at the same time, I think I've kind of got like this OCD, ADD type attention. So I'm sort of entertained by having a bunch of streams of like little things that I get to micromanage. So it's a balance. I would like to sort of clear my plate a little more and have fewer of these things that I'm sort of hyper vigilant about. But I think it does serve me that's sort of entertaining to me. It's better than being totally better than really dreading the management side of things, which I imagine many diabetics do. Now, yeah, in terms of long days and staying healthy, staying fit, one thing that I've been loving, I'm curious to hear your opinion about this, is intermittent fasting. That has been an awesome consumption structure for me. I just basically, get up, have my coffee, take my supplements, do my work, and then by like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm like, oh yeah, I could break the fast right now. That seems reasonable. But it's just like I don't have to worry about that for so much of the day.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely something I've implemented in my own life. I actually started my freshman year of college. I started with the little zero fasting app, and I was just doing a basic 16/8, and I still do it to this day. I think that keeping some kind of consistent flow to your overall eating structure in general does a lot of amazing things for yourself. So every day I know at some point between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. I'm going to have my first meal, and I know at some point between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. lately I'm going to have my my larger meal of the day at dinner. And that's not something that I would say everyone has to do. And if you're going to look at implementing fasting, I would imagine it's best to consult with your primary care provider first, because there's a lot of different effects that it has and a lot of things to consider. But I've certainly noticed benefit from my own end utilizing that approach for 6-7 years now. Crazy to think it's been that long. It's just part of my life at this point. How does that work with the type 1 diabetes, Zach? Is that something that actually helps regulate your blood sugar level, or does it cause a little bit more spiking, or what do you see on your end from your own data?
Yeah, for sure. It helps me regulate my sugar by basically decreasing the complexity or the interference from the intake of carbs. So almost like imagine that you're flying a plane at like 100 feet off the ground. So it's like this is a precarious situation that you can't go to zero, but you don't want to go high. Also, you want to stay at that level. Every time you have carbs, it's like a huge gust of wind that pushes the plane up, and you have to then like push the nose back down with insulin. And so like you can imagine if I'm not having any food at all from say 8 or 9 o'clock at night to 2 or 3 p.m. the following day, that whole window, there's no gust of wind that have to be addressed by insulin, by pushing the nose down. So it really does smooth things out for me. Now that said, we have a steady stream of wind or of glucose that's being deposited into the bloodstream at all times. And then we have a steady amount of insulin. I'm talking regular people, not diabetics here. Then we have a stream of insulin that's released from the pancreas to offset that amount of carbs that's being put into the bloodstream. When you're carb depleted, or when you're basically when you're thoroughly fasted, then basically that the carbs being deposited in the bloodstream are gonna there's gonna be basically less impact from those. There's gonna be fewer of those, and also your insulin sensitivity is gonna turn up. So meaning insulin's gonna go farther. It's gonna have a bigger impact on pushing sugar down. So what that ends up meaning is when I fast, I have to use less insulin. So that's something that diabetics absolutely have to know before trying something like this. It's very similar with like long, slow aerobic activity. If you're gonna go for a 5-hour walk, you have to know that basically your insulin sensitivity is going to go up and your sugar is going to go down unless you decrease the amount of insulin you're using. So for that reason, because of the complications around that, most people probably avoid doing extreme sports or doing crazy diets when they're diabetic. My view on it is that we just like everybody else, we should care about insulin sensitivity. We should do what it takes to basically sensitize ourselves to insulin. And that means exercise, and it means controlling consumption. And fasting is a great way for me to do that. So I prefer to basically just preemptively adjust my own use of insulin rather than restrict myself from these things that I think are useful interventions.
Right. Now, do you do your exercise, your workouts, your runs? Are you doing them in the fasted state, or are you doing them in the, eating window, I would say? Or how does the, your physical activity mix in with that?
Yeah, more and more now I'm liking exercising fasted and then breaking the fast shortly after. So usually that means during the day around lunchtime, I'll go out for a short run. And then the weekends in the morning, typically I'll do my longer sessions. So I quite like, this is not something I'd recommend for runners that are only a few years into their running career. But basically, I discovered that I would get benefits from doing back-to-back big sessions and then taking a long time to recover from those. So, historically, the wisdom is basically hard session, easy, easy, hard, easy, easy. So you space out your hard sessions, basically. But then if you look at, the top athletes, they're doing 100 to 130 miles a week of running. And what that means is they have to go long every single day. So how do you get from, short long slash hard, short, short, long slash hard to, long every single day, sometimes with intensity. I think basically the key is to do blocks where you're exposing yourself to this higher level of stimulus. So more mileage for 2 days in a row, and then back off, let yourself recover. So that's at this point, I'd like to take Saturday and Sunday and do kind of a back-to-back longer session. But then during the week, and that means I've fasted a little less as well. So like maybe I'll do that at 10 a.m. to 12, and then I'll eat. Yeah, that's sort of how I do it. Do you fast and exercise as well?
Yeah, so I do a little bit more strength training myself, and instead of the running, and I usually do that in a fasted state myself. So I wake up in the morning, I get my strength training done, and then I go throughout the day. And I know there's, conflicting evidence on how much strength you can actually build while you're in a fasted state. But so far for me, I've been able to get stronger while not necessarily, loading up and crushing 7 or 8 meals a day. And I've been able to maintain low body fat percentage while maintaining high muscle mass, which at the end of the day, that's all I want to do in my life right now. I don't need to, find my way onto a bodybuilding show or anything like that. And, I don't think most people want to, be the number one power lifter or the number one bodybuilder. I think the majority of people just want a healthy, fit, active lifestyle at the end of the day. So I think it's something that can certainly help to facilitate that a little bit better. Now you were mentioning with the running there that you've kind of worked up to the point where you're now doing 2 heavy sessions back to back, and then you kind of mix in heavier or lighter ones during the week. And as we were talking earlier, we talked a little bit about the overlaps between fitness and entrepreneurship and how it can be kind of difficult to burn the candle at both ends, for a prolonged period of time, I'll say. But I would imagine there's probably a time when you kind of had to do that. There's probably kind of a time where you had to sleep less. You had to give up a little bit of free time or going out with your friends or doing things that you enjoy in order to get the business to where it was today. So would you say that you've kind of had, periods, I wouldn't say every day, but periods of time where you had to do the same with your business and you had to put in the late nights and the early mornings and more of like a 20 or even 24-hour day or 100+ hour work week in order to get it to where it is today, as opposed to, again, we said before about it's good to keep a balance with things, but sometimes that scale has to tip in order for you to get that next big breakthrough that you want.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what you just described resembles most that year I spent working on Quevos. I took a gap year actually between sophomore and junior year of college to work on the business. Up to that point, from freshman year of high school to sophomore year of college, running was like that was my, be all end all be all. That was everything to me, and I dedicated basically I would, even though I cared about school and spent a good amount of time on it. It was like, lower on the priority list than like getting my runs in and getting my sleep in for running. And when I took that year off to work on Quevos, I basically running had to take a total backseat. So I was up to 80 or sometimes 90 miles a week. So that sophomore year of college, and had worked up over those 6 years to that point. And then during the year I was working on Quevos, that probably went down to anywhere from 10 to 30. And I went into that year basically saying, okay, this is now taking a backseat. It's no longer my priority. My priority is to get the business off the ground. And so, I knew that, and I didn't force my schedule to comply with my running desires, sort of the other way around. That said, I really haven't had periods of my life when I am sacrificing sleep for months on end. Certainly there's been all-nighters, a lot for actually paper deadlines in college. For the business, definitely late nights, definitely early mornings, but more intermittent. And I definitely do like to thoroughly recover, between stretches where I'm slightly overworked. I think it's just like exercise and fitness where you're borrowing against your future self. The more you feel like you're exhausted. And so, that's not usually my style. That said, I would say I spend a lot of my time thinking. So walking and thinking is sort of like my evening activity. So I don't usually put my stuff down. It's not like I, shut my computer for the night and then I'm done working. So I think that's the way in which I can sort of balance work and play, just by like basically relegating the things that feel like play to later in the day and feel like I'm enjoying myself. But yeah, they end up being, I could probably count those as long work days.
I like that answer, Zach, and I appreciate your honesty and transparency with everything so far. We've talked a lot about, your journey. We've talked a lot about physical health, but one of the things we didn't quite touch on yet was things from a mental side. And I would imagine entrepreneurship and maybe, telling your parents like, hey, I'm going to take a little time off of college to pursue this entrepreneur journey. Or, getting rejected the first time you tried to go on Shark Tank. Like, those are all big mental challenges. So how are you able to keep yourself kind of in a good mental mindset throughout this entire process, I'll say? And how are you able to navigate, the obstacles and hiccups that certainly come up across your journey?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's definitely been some times that have been difficult. During that year I spent working on Quevos, there's a stretch there, maybe 9 to 11 months in, where I was felt like it was a long road ahead, and I was definitely craving more sort of social interaction. I was only maybe 19 or 20 that year, and it felt like I almost describe the business as like a game of Catan or a Monopoly, like playing out over the course of months. So you make a move, and it takes you a lot of time to make that move and a lot of dedication. And then you have to sort of wait and see how the environment or the other player responds. Like also over the course of weeks or months. So it just felt like, I was impatient, and I wasn't quite ready to be an adult, and I wanted things to happen faster than they do. So I think one thing that's helped is I've definitely tempered expectations since then. I'm thinking more in terms of years than months, for like, how quickly these things grow. That helps. We've had some, for both businesses, for Quevos and LifeStacks, had some long delays on things like production and sourcing ingredients, getting into distribution channels. And now, 3 months, even though it's painful, seems like a doable amount of time to sort of be in like prep mode for something. So I think that's one thing that's helped. Now that said, I mean, it would be quite boring to wait for a long time if there wasn't things that you could do in the interim to like make the chances of things going well higher. So it's good to sort of like know which plates must be spinning, know what the priority is for which plates get your attention. And then as soon as you've cleared your plate, I'm mixing metaphors here. As soon as you've been able to like set one thing aside or put one thing in motion, then figuring out what makes sense to do, as that's coming to fruition. So yeah, I guess it's some combination of patience and sort of and a kind of like eagerness to keep moving on things that you can move on.
Definitely. And I would say you kind of alluded to too, almost like a maturity aspect as well, because you were very young and energetic when you got started. And I'm the same way myself. And we want to go at a million miles an hour sometimes. And you kind of quickly realize that not everything can happen overnight. And not everything should happen overnight. Sometimes the best things in life are the ones that take a little bit of time to work up to, the things that require more sacrifice. And I would say at the end of the day, you end up falling in love with the journey and the process more than the end result. Obviously, you want the end result to be favorable. But there was a quote that I was pondering recently from Jocko Willink, and he was talking about the myth of Sisyphus, which for anyone who's not familiar, Sisyphus is a myth or legend of this individual who has to wake up and push a boulder up top the hill, and it rolls back down every time he gets to the top, and then he has to start over and over and over again, and he just keeps pushing the rock. And Jocko Willink was talking, and he was like, if the rock ever stopped at the top and didn't roll back down, eventually I would push it back down myself and then start over, because once you get to the top, if things don't change, you're just static, you're stagnant. And that's not how life works. That's not how entrepreneurship works, as you know, Zach. You have to constantly be doing something. And if you fall in love with the process of doing something and making improvements day after day, then that gets you all that much more closer, I'll say, to where you ultimately need to be.
Yeah. There's a really interesting trade-off there. One other thread that sort of kept me going for these years is I'd say my thinking sessions at night are a mix of the business and philosophy. So definitely, and not the kind of semantic philosophy, more like scientific integration. So how do we take, there's a famous 20th century philosopher, Wilfrid Sellars, who's often quoted as saying philosophy is about uncovering how things hang together. And what that means is taking the scientific image that we're accumulating via science and basically reconciling it with the manifest image, meaning the world as it appears to us. And so I find that whole area of thought really interesting. How do we understand our situation, basically, using the insights that we now have available to us? And there's sort of a translation issue. You've got this theory on paper that describes some somewhat opaque phenomenon in the world, but somehow what that's talking about is like the stuff that you're made of somehow, or the energy that flows through you, or like the way your cells work. And so, how does that relate to our view of what's going on with us? And should, to what extent should it relate to our view of what's going on with us? Similarly, like neuroscience and sort of phenomenological psychology. So this sort of study of the brain, and also this view from inside that we have, that must be a view from inside the brain, but it's not clear like exactly how that view would be generated. What is the signature of an experience? That's still an open question. I bring this up because, in this sort of grappling with philosophy, there's an interesting, it's very much process oriented, and a lot of discoveries are just about doing that process better. But then it also seems like there might be sort of some ends, some like rock at the top of the hill kind of moments, where as soon as you get the rock at the top of the hill, it does just sit there, and it doesn't like, maybe there's another hill that you then push that rock up. But it's a sort of interesting trade-off between like having activities that are that sort of evergreen, where you can just keep working and keep making marginal improvements, and things that actually sort of finish. And I've been thinking about that some.
And I'm not quite as well read into philosophy as you are, Zach. I definitely have a lot to learn about some of the individuals that you mentioned. But that's the kind of stuff that keeps your wheels turning mentally. And I think that's an essential thing. I think a lot of people like the mindless activities of today's day and age. And that's not to say that they're bad by any means, but it's always interesting to kind of ponder the deeper side of things as well.
Yeah, for sure. With respect to sort of today's mindless activities, how are people feeling? I think not that well overall. Like, and it may be a matter of sort of like these. It's much easier to service the lower levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs than it is to service the higher levels. And so you've got companies coming in and just captivating our attention at these low levels. Where they know how to make us scroll, and that is, I think, that is actually crowding out our tendency, or our eagerness to live more rich lives, more engaged lives. If we didn't have all this stuff that was distracting us, we actually would be forced to figure out what the hell to do with our time. That's kind of I've been thinking about that too. Like, I think I hope this is growing pains, and I hope we figure out how to put our phones down and engage in the world. I think there's some loneliness that is being generated by the current context.
I like to say the hardest things in life are done the least, yet give you the most. And everything that we've talked about today, from what you just mentioned of, putting the phone down and actually engaging with people and having real conversations, all the way up to physical exercise or intermittent fasting, which is ultimately one of the best forms of discipline practice we have to today, all the way up to entrepreneurship. All of these things that we've discussed are very rewarding in nature, but they require sacrifice. They require you to give something up. There's always an opportunity cost to every action or inaction that you have. And at the end of the day, I mean, I would say it's totally worth it. It's totally worth it for me to, get up at 4:30 in the morning and go to the gym and get a workout in, as opposed to get, 7.5 hours of sleep instead of 7. Like, for me, that is a sacrifice I'll make every day. Again, that's not the easy choice. It'd be a lot easier for me to roll back over in bed, flip under the covers, and stay there for another hour. But nothing worth having comes easy, as they say. Do you have any kind of closing thoughts or closing remarks on anything that we've discussed as we start to wrap up here today?
Yeah, well, I'd love to tell you a little bit about this product here. I think you should order some for your fast and see if it helps.
Yeah, definitely. Tell me a little bit more about Life Stacks here, Zach.
Yeah, well, let me ask, do you take MCT or anything like that when you fast?
I have used coconut oil in the past, yes.
Cool. Okay, awesome. All right. Well, for the audience, I'm not sure if this topic's been covered, but basically MCTs are medium chain triglycerides as opposed to the longer chain triglycerides that we have from regular fats. That means basically they end up being broken down more easily. They don't have to go through extensive digestion like regular fats do. And so they act as a really great substrate for brain and body fuel rapidly. So they shift you into this ketogenic mode where you're burning fat, basically. So many people use MCT to facilitate fasting. It sort of works in synergy with metabolic pathways around fasting. And so what we've done is we've put together a stack of MCT and really premium nootropics and adaptogens designed to deliver all the energy and enhance the metabolic benefits of fasting. So basically, you take this, you add it to coffee, take a scoop of coffee in the morning, and you just feel really good, smooth, clear-headed, and you don't think about food. So we think it's a really nice way for people that want to get into fasting to give it a shot. And if you are fasting already and you're looking for a performance boost, something to maybe make your workouts go even better when you're fasting, this is it.
Awesome. Now, say you're like me and you don't drink coffee, Zach. What should I do?
Yeah, we're working on some solutions for folks like that. The added coffee occasion is very interesting to us because coffee is also synergistic with the fasting, with the benefits of fasting. So it's got a thermogenic effect that basically allows you to burn a little more fat. It's also got those polyphenols like from the coffee itself, and those are supportive of like the health defense systems that you're activating when you're fasting. So we do like coffee, and also added coffee is interesting because Americans have obviously established coffee as the kind of like go-to energy occasion during the day. Like that is the nootropic that everybody's already having for the most part. And so we wanted to basically piggyback on that occasion, basically enhance that occasion, make it more functional, and further your fast even more. But there's, well, I guess stay tuned. Maybe in about 3 months we'll have another product for you that's an add water product.
Awesome. I'm excited for that. I would be looking forward to that there, Zach. Do you have any other takeaways that you want people to remember about your journey or the success that you've had with Quevos or any other things that we shared today, Zach?
One last thing I'd say is that at LifeStacks and in our personal lives as the operators of Quevos and LifeStacks, we really do want to take a holistic mindset when it comes to building our lives. So, for us, that's enough sleep, whether that's 7 or 7.5 or 8 or 8.5. It's the nutritional support, so actually eating the right things each day. It's the exercise. It's the focus on the long-term vision and implementing that each day. But I guess our view is to basically treat the process as the outcome. So, and how can we basically live, expand our capacity and use that capacity well. So that's sort of the name of the game. And our hope is that the products that we're making at LifeStacks are going to help you do that. So maybe add some willpower to your day, make it easier to achieve your fitness and health goals, and also help you get stuff done. Because we all need to get stuff done.
That we do, as we've discussed at length today, Zach. Zach, for people who want to find out more about you personally, or maybe they want to find out more about Quevos or LifeStacks, where can they find more about all of, both you and your businesses, I'll say?
Yeah, I don't sustain much of an online presence other than for the businesses, and that's just for personal health sake. It's just definitely easier not to have an extra thing to manage. But you can find info about Quevos at quevos.com, info about LifeStacks at lifestacks.com. And then we are also on Instagram. I believe it's _eat Quevos on Instagram, and LifeStacks, I think, is LifeStacks Performance on Instagram.
Awesome.
And then one other thing to mention is that we're doing a try before you buy it offer on this MCT added coffee product that I showed you. And what that means is you can go to the website right now, add it to your cart, have it shipped to you for free. If you like it, you can keep it and pay. And if you don't, then you just return it. We're confident enough that people benefit from this product tremendously. And so people are going to end up keeping it. So we want to give you the option to try it risk-free.
Awesome. That's really good stuff there, Zach. We'll link to all of that below in the description. So if you didn't quite catch it, you can just click there and check out Quevos. And you could also check out Life Stacks. You can check out their website, social media, all of that below. Zach, really appreciate your time today, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Dan.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Brawn Body Health and Fitness Podcast. If you liked this episode, please make sure to share it with a friend, subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes, and leave a review. This way we can spread knowledge and motivation and help reach more people. Thank you again for listening, and I'll see you next time.